This is my translation of the prompt. Eugenia, hey Mancini, AI need desert, main kaya peta. Rough translation. These are not human. These are machines. What has AI created in the desert? The inspiration for this image was actually a poster from a 1980s Bollywood film. I'll share it in the end screen. The idea of an AI creating something in the desert really fascinated me, especially with the juxtaposition of technology and nature, and also the idea of a man versus machine. I wanted to add a story element to the image where a man is running away from the machine, or maybe even become one with the machine. So that's what we have here. I think the main thing to focus on when painting this was the composition. We want to show both the man and the machine, and then use the environment to lead our eye to both of them. So there are these two very distinct sections to the composition. Now, let's get started. Let's start out with a rough sketch, just to get the feel of things. This will help us figure out if anything needs to be adjusted, like the angle or perspective. Also, depending on how detailed your drawing is, you might need to adjust the aspect ratio or the cropping. It is important to leave some empty space around the edges, so we can crop it later on if needed. In general, I like this pose. We can see both the man and the machine. And also, the diagonal of the machine leads us directly to the man. Next, let's do the line art. We're going to start with the background elements. These are simple shapes and lines that describe the overall structure of the environment. Once that's done, we can move on to the foreground elements. I am keeping the man relatively simple, since we want the viewer's attention to be drawn to the machine. For the machine, we're going to break it up into sections so it doesn't look too complicated. First, we have the rib cage, and then we have the legs and the arms. Each section has a unique style to it. The rib cage has this organic flowing style, while the legs and arms have more mechanical looking gears. These sections will be painted separately, so we can focus on each one individually. The next step is to fill in the background. For the sky, we're going to use a gradient going from black at the top to dark blue at the bottom. Then we're going to create a simple sand effect for the ground. Notice how the sand is only on the lower third of the canvas. The rest is either sky or machine. This will make it easier to separate the sand from the other elements. Once the background is finished, we can move on to the foreground. We'll start with the man. I am going to block out his shape and then add some basic shading using a larger brush size. The idea is to give him some volume without getting too detailed. Then we can add the details to his clothing. I'm using a smaller brush now and focusing on the folds and creases of his outfit. Then we can move on to the machine. We'll start with the rib cage. Since it's made up of bones, we can give it a more organic feel with the brush strokes. The light source is coming from the left side, so we're going to make sure all the shadows are falling in that direction. For the rib cage, we're going to focus on the highlights and shadows. The highlight will show where the light is hitting directly, and the shadow will show where the light is hitting indirectly. We don't want to make the shading too complex, but simple and clean. Next, we can move on to the legs and arms. These are more mechanical, so we want to give it a different style. I'm going to add some gears and bolts using stencils. Stencils are great for adding repetitive patterns and designs. They save a lot of time instead of drawing each gear individually. We'll also add some basic shading to give it some volume. Now we can move on to the glowing parts. I'm going to start with the eyes and the skull. For the eyes, we want to give it this glowing green effect. So I'm going to use a soft brush and add some bright green color. Notice how the highlight and shadows are still present in the glowing parts. We don't want everything to just be bright. Some parts will be brighter than others. The same goes for the skull. We'll add some bright green color, but also make sure to include the highlight and shadows. Next, we can move on to the rib cage. This is the trickiest part because we have multiple layers of bones. The inner bones will be brighter than the outer ones. Also, the highlight and shadows will be slightly different. We need to take our time and make sure each layer is visible. Lastly, we can add some finishing touches. I'm going to add some green sparks coming from the glowing parts. Sparks are a great way to add some extra interest to the design. We don't want everything to be static. Some elements should be moving, or at least look like they're moving. Also, we're going to add some texture to the sand using a simple brush stroke. Finally, we'll add some subtle fog coming from the bottom. This will help to separate the sand from the ground. At this point, the painting is complete. But before we move on, let's go over a couple of things. When we're happy with the overall design, we can go ahead and crop it. This will give us a nice composition. Also, we're going to add some extra contrast and brightness adjustments to make sure the image pops. And finally, we'll add the bold glowing text, AI born in the sand. This text summarizes the concept of the image, AI creating a machine in the desert. So, there you have it. This was the creative process behind this image. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more content. Also, if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, check out the playlist linked below. It has a bunch of videos with similar themes and concepts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.